My own father threw me out into the cold. Years later, I walked into a wedding wearing my colonel's uniform. And when I saw the groom, it was the same stepbrother who once destroyed my life. Hi, my name is Avery Blake, and I was 22 years old when I was thrown out of my own home. My mother had passed away not long before, and the silence she left behind was heavy enough to crush me. I thought nothing could hurt more than losing her, until my father remarried. His new wife, Paige Mercer, walked into our house carrying the sharp smile of someone who already knew where she wanted to stand, and her son Cole followed close behind, looking at me like I was a trespasser in my own kitchen. At first, I told myself to endure. I tried to make space, tried to believe that maybe in time we could blend into some awkward version of a family. But Paige made sure there was no space for me. Her words cut quiet and deep. "You don't belong here anymore, Avery. This is our home now." Cole didn't need to say much. His sneer said enough. The hardest part wasn't their cruelty. It was my father, Martin Blake. The man I had once believed would stand for me, protect me, even just acknowledge me. Instead, he listened to them. One night, after weeks of arguments and silences, he opened the door, looked at me without warmth and said, "It's better if you leave." And just like that, I was no longer a daughter. I was a burden pushed into the cold. The authorities got involved. Neighbors had heard shouting, and soon I was placed into a transitional living shelter run by social services. The shelter was plain, with peeling paint on the walls and rules taped above the bunks, but to me it was the first proof that survival was possible. I remember lying on that narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, and whispering to myself, "They may have taken my home, but they won't take my future." The shelter was not a home, but it was a roof, and at that point, I could not afford to ask for more. The place smelled faintly of disinfectant and worn-out mattresses, and every night carried the restless hum of other lives unraveling around me. Some of the girls whispered in their sleep, some cried quietly into their pillows, and some stared blankly at the walls like I did, wondering how life could fracture so suddenly. I learned quickly that survival in a transitional shelter was about discipline. There were curfews, chores, mandatory meetings with counselors, and a constant reminder that the world outside would not slow down for any of us. I folded laundry for other residents to earn a few dollars. I cleaned offices during the evenings. I stacked shelves in a nearby grocery store until my hands stung. Every shift was exhausting, but every paycheck, no matter how small, was proof I wasn't finished. It wasn't just about money. I enrolled in community college courses, night classes in psychology and history, the kind most people overlooked. I needed the structure, the sense that my mind was moving forward even when my life felt stuck. My classmates saw me as quiet, maybe even cold. None of them knew that I carried an unspoken vow inside me. I would never again let anyone decide my worth. The shelter had a counselor named Elaine Porter. She wasn't warm in the way my mother had been, but she had a bluntness that worked. One evening, after watching me study at a table long past lights out, she said, "You've got grit. Most people break here. You haven't. What's next?" I didn't answer right away, but her question burned inside me. What was next? Scraping through part-time jobs forever? Living small because others had decided I was small? No. I needed something larger than myself, something that demanded everything I had but could also give me the power to never be powerless again. The answer came when I passed a recruitment poster in the community center. The face of a soldier stared back at me beneath the words, "Be all you can be." I stopped and looked at it for a long time, my throat tight. That night, lying awake in the shelter, I whispered my decision into the dark. I'm going to join the army. The day I walked into the recruiter's office, my hands were trembling, but my resolve was firm. The sergeant behind the desk studied me with a half smile, the kind he probably used on hundreds of people who thought they could wear the uniform. "The army isn't easy," he said. "You sure you're ready for this?" I didn't hesitate. I don't have anywhere else to go. I need this. Basic training was everything the brochures never told you. Mud grinding into your skin, lungs burning as you pushed through miles of running, voices shouting at you until your ears rang. Some recruits broke down. Some quit. Every night, I thought about the night my father closed the door on me, about Paige's cold smile, about Cole's sneer. The memory wasn't a wound anymore, it was fuel. Every push-up, every obstacle, Every blister was a promise that I would never crawl back to them begging. There were moments I nearly collapsed. Once, after a brutal ruck march, my legs gave out, and I hit the dirt hard. A drill sergeant leaned down, barking in my face. "Blake, you gonna quit? You gonna run home crying?" I forced myself back on my feet, even as tears stung my eyes. "No, Sergeant," I shouted. "I don't have a home to run to." That answer changed something. The drill sergeant's expression didn't soften. Drill sergeants never soften, but he stopped doubting me. From then on, I wasn't just another recruit. I was the one who refused to break. Weeks blurred into months. My body hardened, my mind sharpened. I found rhythm in the grind, rifle drills at dawn, field exercises under the weight of rucksacks that felt heavier than my own past. And in the midst of it all, I discovered something shocking. I belonged here. On graduation day, when I stood in uniform with my company, my heart hammered with pride. I wasn't the girl thrown out of her home anymore. I was Private Avery Blake, soldier of the United States Army. But this was only the beginning. The Army had given me a door into a new life. Now I wanted more than survival. I wanted to lead. The Army became more than a lifeline. It became a forge. Every day hammered me into someone harder, sharper, more precise. But even as I adjusted to the rhythm of missions, drills, and duty rosters, a thought kept burning in me. I didn't just want to follow orders. I wanted to lead. That chance came when one of my superiors, Colonel Holt, called me into her office after a field exercise. Her desk was covered in reports, her eyes sharp but curious as they studied me. "Blake," she said, "you've got initiative. You think 2 steps ahead, and people follow you without realizing it. Ever thought about commissioning?" I hesitated. Commissioning meant becoming an officer, me, the girl who'd been sleeping on a shelter mattress not long ago. "I don't know if I'm officer material, ma'am," I admitted. Her reply was simple, but it cut through every doubt. "You don't wait for the world to hand you permission. You take it." Those words stuck. I applied for the Army's Green to Gold program and was accepted. Suddenly, I was back in classrooms, this time as part of ROTC, balancing coursework, drills, and leadership labs. It wasn't easy. There were nights I collapsed at my desk with textbooks still open, mornings I dragged myself awake before dawn. But every lecture, every tactical scenario, every leadership evaluation reminded me that I wasn't just learning theory. I was building the authority to command. When I finally pinned on the gold bar of a second lieutenant, I held it in my hand for a long moment before sliding it onto my uniform. That small piece of metal carried more weight than all the insults Paige had thrown at me, more gravity than the night my father told me to leave. This wasn't just a rank, it was proof that I had rewritten the ending they once scripted for me. Leading soldiers was a responsibility that shook me at first. I remember being the lowest in the ranks, bone-tired and doubted. Now it was my job to be the steady hand, the one who saw more in people than they saw in themselves. I promised myself I would never lead with cruelty. My authority would be earned, not demanded. And yet, deep inside, I knew I still hadn't reached the summit. The Army had given me a place, but I wanted more. I wanted to prove, not just to them, but to myself, that I could stand where only the strongest stood. That meant one thing: Special Forces. The path to Special Forces wasn't a straight line, it was a gauntlet. Even applying felt like daring fate to laugh in my face. The selection board was blunt. Fewer than half who tried would make it. Most washed out. Some left injured. A few were carried off on stretchers. I stared at the packet in my hands, my name typed neatly at the top. Avery Blake. The same name Paige had sneered at, the same name my father had once spoken with disappointment. I signed anyway. Selection began with silence. No one cheered us on, no motivational speeches, just rucksacks heavier than reason, distances longer than the horizon, and instructors whose job was to strip us down until only the core remained. Sleep was a luxury. Meals were fuel swallowed on the move. Every mile we carried weight that wasn't just gear, it was everything we dragged from our pasts. I pushed until my lungs felt like fire. There were nights I dropped to my knees, fingers clawing the dirt, whispering, "Don't you quit, Avery. Not here. Not ever." And every time I stood, something inside me hardened. By the end, I wasn't sure if I had passed or simply survived. Then came the moment. My name called in formation, the green beret placed in my hands. For the first time since I was 22, I felt whole. I was no longer the girl pushed from her home. I was an officer in the United States Army Special Forces. From there, missions took me to places most Americans would never see. Villages carved into mountainsides, cities simmering with tension, deserts that swallowed sound. My team became my family, the brothers and sisters who would take a bullet for me and I for them. Awards followed, citations, promotions. But what mattered most wasn't the medals. It was the way my soldiers looked at me, the respect in their eyes. They didn't care about my past. They cared that I stood with them, fought for them, never quit on them. Years passed. My uniform carried new insignia, Colonel Avery Blake. A title no one had given me. I had taken it with blood, sweat, and the sheer refusal to break. I thought I had buried my old life for good, but the past has a way of stepping out of the shadows when you least expect it, and it came back to me in the form of a wedding invitation. It was an ordinary afternoon in the office when the knock came at my door. I looked up to see Lieutenant Naomi Reed, one of my brightest junior officers. She had a nervous smile, the kind that usually meant she was about to ask for something big. "Colonel," she said, stepping inside and holding an envelope in both hands like it was fragile. "I'd be honored if you came to my wedding." For a moment, I just stared at her. In the field, Naomi was unshakable, calm under fire, sharp in every briefing. But here she was, cheeks flushed, waiting like a cadet hoping her work passed inspection. I stood and accepted the envelope. Inside was a card embossed with silver leaves, the date neatly printed, the venue listed just outside the city. "You're inviting me to one of the biggest days of your life?" I asked, more touched than I expected. Her answer was immediate. "Of course. You've been more than a commander to me. You've been a mentor. You believed in me when I doubted myself. It wouldn't feel right if you weren't there." Her words caught me off guard. 4 years, I had fought to earn my place, to prove myself worthy of the uniform. Hearing her say that, hearing that I had become the steady hand I once needed, was worth more than any medal. I nodded, slipping the card back into its envelope. "Then I'll be there, Lieutenant. In full uniform. Don't expect me to dance, though." Naomi laughed, relief flooding her face. "I'll settle for a salute." When she left, the room felt strangely quiet. I held the invitation in my hands and let the weight of it settle. I had no idea that walking into that wedding would mean walking straight into the heart of my past. The venue glowed with soft light and polished marble, the kind of place that carried its own hush. Guests filled the hall in elegant suits and dresses, but when I walked in wearing my dress uniform, the air shifted. Conversations faltered, eyes turned. The sound of my boots against the floor carried farther than it should have. I had grown used to the weight of the uniform, but here it felt different, like it was a spotlight cutting through a room that wasn't meant for me. Still, I kept my head high. Near the front, Naomi turned. The moment she saw me, her face lit up. She broke from her circle of bridesmaids and walked toward me, her gown swaying with each step. Then, in front of everyone, she straightened, raised her hand, and gave me a sharp salute. "Colonel Blake," she said with a smile that was half pride, half gratitude, "you came?" I returned the salute, and for a heartbeat, pride swelled in my chest. This was what I had built, a reputation, respect, a place where once I had nothing. Then I saw him. The groom stepped forward, adjusting his tie, his face caught in the light. For a moment, I thought I was seeing a ghost. The sharp jawline, the smug tilt of his mouth, it was Cole Mercer, my stepbrother, the boy who had smirked as his mother shoved me out of my own home. The hall seemed to shrink around me. Naomi glanced between us, confusion tugging at her expression. "Colonel, you know him?" I drew in a breath that felt heavier than any rucksack I had ever carried. My voice was steady when I spoke, but every word cut like glass. "Yes, he's my stepbrother. Years ago, he and his mother made sure I was thrown out of my house. And my father let it happen." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Naomi's smile vanished. Cole's face drained of color. And from the corner, I saw them, Martin Blake and Paige Mercer, standing frozen, their eyes wide as if the past had just walked in wearing a uniform they could never touch. The silence was absolute. Every guest was waiting for the next word, the next move. Naomi's bouquet trembled in her hands. She looked from me to Cole, then back again, her face pale but her voice clear. "Is it true?" she asked. "You betrayed your own sister?" Cole opened his mouth, but no words came. Paige tried to step forward, her polished smile cracking, and Martin's shoulders sagged under the weight of silence. Naomi's voice sharpened, each syllable striking like a blade. "I will not marry into a family that could throw their own daughter into the street. If you can betray her, you can betray anyone." Gasps surged again. Some guests whispered, some shook their heads. The officiant closed the book in his hands. The ceremony halted in midair. Cole dropped to his knees in front of me, desperation spilling out. "Please, Avery, Colonel, help me. Tell her I'm not that man anymore. Tell her to stay. I love her." Martin's voice wavered. "Avery, please, you can save this. Don't humiliate us further. We made mistakes. Help us fix them." I looked at them, the father who had turned his back, the stepmother who had smiled while I was cast out, the brother who had watched without pity. Years ago, I had begged for their love, their approval, their shelter. But now, standing in my uniform, I realized I didn't need any of it. I took a breath, my words cutting through the silence. "A family that abandoned me once will never have my support. You lost me long ago, and now you've lost her too." I turned to Naomi, whose eyes shone with tears, but they were not the tears of a bride, they were the tears of someone saved. She nodded to me, resolute. Then I faced the hall, adjusted the weight of my uniform, and walked toward the exit. Each step echoed louder than the last. Behind me, voices rose, pleas, sobs, the rustle of a wedding unraveling into disgrace. But I didn't look back. Outside, the air was crisp and cold. I drew it deep into my lungs and felt the silence settle not as emptiness, but as freedom. For the first time, the past no longer chained me. And as I walked away, my final thought was simple, steady, unbreakable. Honor is the only family I will ever need. That was my story, and walking away with my head held high was the only revenge I ever needed. If you felt my journey, don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Repeat for more powerful stories like this. And now I'll ask you, if you were in my place, would you have forgiven the family that once threw you away or walked away forever like I did?